You are listening to A Light to the Nations. This podcast is a production of the Ephesus School Network.
Rejoice, O Father Raphael, adornment of the Holy Church. Thou art...
Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of A Light to the Nations. I'm your host, Father Fred Shaheen. This episode is dedicated to the commemoration in the Antiochian Orthodox Church of our Father among the Saints, Raphael of Brooklyn. Saint Raphael is commemorated on the first Saturday in November. At Divine Liturgy, the assigned readings are from the Gospel of John and from the epistle to Hebrews. In chapter 10 of John, Jesus speaks of himself as the Good Shepherd, the one whose voice the sheep hear when he calls them by name and leads them out. The emphasis on his leading them out reflects a scriptural motif. God takes his people out of Egypt and leads them into Canaan. In between the two is a 40-year period of instruction and testing in the wilderness. It is through obedience to that instruction, to the words that proceed out of the mouth of God, that the people are promised life. The gospel is from John chapter 10, and we will hear Jesus say, "I am the door. Anyone who enters by me will be saved. He will come in and out and find pasture." We might ask, the door to what? And what are we going in and out of? It doesn't say right in that context. Go to the beginning of chapter 10, though. Jesus says, "Most assuredly I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber." So we're talking about a sheepfold, an area of enclosure that protects the sheep. "But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out." A little bit later, Jesus is going to say, "I am the good shepherd." So this passage is recapitulating what the prophet Ezekiel said in the Old Testament, where he chastised the shepherds of Israel because they were making themselves fat and they were neglecting the sheep. We hear the Lord say, "I am against the shepherds of Israel. I will appoint one shepherd over them, my servant David. I will be their God, and David, my beloved, will be prince over them." David in Hebrew is Dawood, the beloved, and we see Jesus as the fulfillment of that. He's the real David, the beloved Son of God. So Jesus is both, in an interesting way, the door in and out, and he's also the one who leads the sheep. It's interesting what he says here in verse 3. "The sheep hear his voice, he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out." Why is it out? We'd almost think it would be the opposite. It would be going into the sheepfold as kind of a protection. Well, that word, sheepfold here, in Greek is αὐλή, and if we look a little bit farther in the Gospel of John, it's the word that's used when Jesus is going to stand before the high priest, and it says, "Peter stood outside of the courtyard and did not enter in." That courtyard is αὐλή. It's an area of enclosure in the palace. You know, in the ancient world, the high priest was the king. So palace and temple, you want to hear those kind of interchangeably. It's connected to the temple. So what Jesus is saying here is he is the shepherd that's leading his people out of the temple, because the temple is made by the hand of man, and it is going to be destroyed. It's going to be rubble. So he's leading them out of that where they find pasture and where they will be saved. He's leading them out to graze and to be in the open to a new temple that's not made by the hand of man, the temple of Jerusalem that is coming down from above. And we know that because we're going to hear in the epistle to the Hebrews that Jesus is the one who made the high priestly sacrifice. We have such a high priest, one who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven, and a minister of the tabernacle, the true tent that is set up not by man, but by the Lord. So Jesus is the high priest of the Jerusalem above. It's funny to call him a high priest because Jesus doesn't have a table. He's not in a building. He's not wearing vestments. He doesn't have a censer. He's not bringing animals to slaughter. The offering he is making is of himself. That's his high priestly sacrifice once for all. And in that way, he's the priest of the temple in the Jerusalem above. That's why he's leading them out in that passage. And then he says a little bit later, he says, and I have other sheep which are not of this fold. Once again, that word αὐλή, so not the temple sheep. I must bring them also, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. He means there are others who are not of Jerusalem, the Gentiles. He's going to seek all of them and gather them into one flock with himself as the one shepherd. We hear that gospel and the epistle in the remembrance of St. Raphael, and all that's applied to him as being a shepherd who in America gathered the lost sheep. Think about the Christians who were of Syro-Arab descent 150 years ago being lost and needing to be gathered and brought in under the one shepherd with the one teaching. So that's why we see him depicted in the icons holding the gospel book. He looks like a bishop that would visit us today, vested with the crown and holding the gospel book, because the bishop's role is to give us that teaching and rightly divide the word of truth. That's his chief function as the shepherd. He rules with that gospel book. The bishop also holds a staff. And it happened about 6 or 7 years ago. Somebody found something. They found a walking stick, and it looked kind of special, but they didn't know anything about it, but it had an engraving on it, and it said, Bishop Raphael of Brooklyn. So they thought, this must be something pretty important. They put it for auction, so it was on eBay. That's a bishop's staff. Now, bishops have a liturgical staff that they use when they're presiding, and they have another one that's not liturgical, but it's like a walking stick, but it represents the same thing. It represents the teaching. Somebody in the Antiochian Archdiocese caught wind of that, and they bid on it, so they secured the purchase of Bishop Raphael's staff, and it's now on display in the Heritage and Learning Center at Antiochian Village. It's an important artifact for a very important saint of the church. Bishop Raphael was responsible for founding in his ministry, which wasn't very long. He died at a relatively young age, 30 churches in North America. And as a matter of fact, I was going through the list, and I've been involved in 5 of those, just to say that I'm aware of the stamp that his shepherding has put on the churches in North America, particularly the Antiochian Orthodox churches. It's a wonderful thing to be given that staff to hold and to feed God's people with the word of truth through the gospel, and to do it faithfully, and to do it to the point where he really sacrificed his life. There's no miracles associated with St. Raphael. Nothing wondrous in that sense, just a life lived serving God and being faithful to the call to gather his lost sheep into one flock under the one shepherd, who is Christ. His representative in North America for the Syro-Arabs 150 years ago was Bishop St. Raphael. So we honor his memory today. Just to point out to you, all the scriptural references, whenever we talk about lives of saints, we always take it back to what we know, what has been written, what is in the canon. So he's an equal to the apostles. So we know what the apostles are. He's one like them. He's a new Moses. He is a new Elijah. A new Ezra, and it says the one who built the temple of God. But remember, that temple of God is the temple that is in the Jerusalem that is coming to us. Because the Jerusalem that is now, as St. Paul says in Galatians, is enslaved with her children. We don't want to be of that Jerusalem that was captured, that was destroyed. The Jerusalem above, the one that is coming to us, is free, and she is our mother. So he is like a new Ezra of the temple above the New Jerusalem that is coming down to us as a gift from God.
This concludes a bonus episode of A Light to the Nations. I'd like to wish all of my listeners a blessed commemoration of St. Raphael of Brooklyn. Thank you for listening today. I look forward to meeting you next time.